Okay, anyway, back onto this. And just a plug here for Truman. I must say, he is just really one of these really clever thinkers, and he's always impressed me as being someone to take a fresh look at something and think about it differently. But so I really appreciate this paper he did in 2000. I think it's just great. So, where are we in the world? This is a paper from Nielsen et al. 10 years or so ago, just pointing out what abysmal shape our rivers around the world are, that we have regulated the flows of most major rivers around the world, and that they're in really, really, really rough shape. And definitely we're down here at this point where habitat availability is quite low as a consequence of that fragmentation. If you look at the terrestrial world, there's been a variety of different takes on this. This is one by Hoekstra and a variety of other people, that different biomes have different levels of habitat conversion relative to protection. And you can, of course, cut this at any sort of organizational scale. Temperate grasslands, savannas, and shrublands. That's sort of on a this is done on kind of a global scale of these different global ecosystems, but some of them are in pretty bad shape. People have done this for the state of California, the United States, looking at Palouse Prairie and the Pacific Northwest or whatever. But that there are different ecosystems where we've done a very poor job of protecting them, and we've lost most of those examples, and that we may, if we want to keep those kinds of ecosystems around, have to engage in restoration. Just another little bit of an aside. One of the things that has emerged as an area of popular interest in conservation biology now is this debate between land sparing and land sharing. And here are, four papers out of ISI Web of Science on land sharing, land sparing that have popped up in the last 3 months. So that it's something that has a lot of active research emerging now as to whether in protecting biodiversity we're better off concentrating impacts and then protecting areas, so that's land sparing, or to try and minimize but make more extensive land use through working landscapes, and this idea of land sharing for biodiversity. And we don't expect there to be a singular answer on that, but that it's now been a common theme in thinking about strategies for conservation. And one of the interesting places to look at this is in forests around the world. And so here's a paper by Hansen in 2013. And it's a little bit complicated. You might need to pause this and look at it if you want to grasp this. But that you can look around the world at forest cover, and there's places where we're losing forests, and we think of the tropics as losing forests pretty rapidly. But there are other places where we're gaining forests, and that already been through a period of heavy deforestation, and we're really into a period of reforestation. This is a look at forests in the western United States, and the wildland urban interface. Victor Radiloff again, and the little insets down in the bottom are different places where we've gone through. We have this broad wildland urban interface, and part of the reason we have that is that much of the area that had been deforested, particularly in parts of the eastern United States, are actually reforesting. That this is a look at that with the Piedmont and the Appalachians. Well, this is a little bit hard to discern in a short period of time, but in fact, what we have in the eastern United States is an area that was under intense agricultural production in the 19th century that has gone into suburban, often suburban, rural, forested areas, and though it's actually gone through quite a lot of reforestation, and so it's disorganized restoration, and so as a consequence of land abandonment. And if you look at that land, a lot of it is in private ownership, and that it's mostly in small parcels. So there's this disorganized, non-systematic, laissez-faire restoration of the forested eastern United States, and that by far the largest class of these landowners own less than 10 acres. And so that then there tends to be all these conservation tensions that arise, that there's human wildlife conflict on things like fox predation on chickens, but also urban wildlife, and then also human health issues like white-tailed deer, Lyme disease, hantavirus, etc. And so that these can be kind of problematic areas where restoration and conservation also intersect. And this is something that is going on, worldwide. So here is a paper about land cover change and human population trends in the greater Serengeti ecosystem, and that all over the world we see with human population growth that humans are bumping right up against borders of reserved areas, and that this enhances the need for restoration ecology and sort of the thinking about that intersection where conservation meets restoration. Just touching on this lightly, of course, that some people also classify translocations of species, as we talked about today in class, uh, as a component of restoration, and it can be because we're interested in the animals themselves, but it can also be because we're interested in the functions that they provide to the ecosystems, and that's been one of the arguments for this rewilding argument. And there is something called the Rewilding Institute, and they're trying to move organisms that are maybe at risk in one place, like Przewalski's, I don't think I spelled that, Przewalski's, I think there's a K missing out of that word, horse in New Mexico. The idea of putting them into new place or back into places where there were other ecological equivalents in the past. And so, as a conservationist, we often think, well, does it contribute to the protection of the species and the ecosystem function? And as a restoration ecologist, we might be thinking about, does it replace the missing interactions that were lost through that focus on, through the extinction of the previous species? Now, of course, this also brings up the issue of climate change, and that restoration ecologists might think about historical range of variability of different ecosystems and how they used to be, and trying to put them back the way they were. With climate change, this becomes increasingly difficult, and we'll spend a bit of time talking then. All sorts of degradations, it becomes increasingly difficult. Invasive species also pose those kinds of problems, and we'll spend a bit of time talking about that in class on Thursday, and I've made it in 7 minutes and 20 seconds. So there you go. See you on Thursday.